Alright, here we're going to do a quick tutorial on image editing workflow and in this case a couple of the flaw adjustment tools that you could use. Now flaws can be anything from out of place hair, dust on the lens, things in the picture you just would rather not have there. So we'll go over a few of the options that you can use to help touch up some of your images. In this case, what I'm going to start off with is called the healing brush tool. And so if you look down on the left side of your tool palette, you'll see one that looks like a little band-aid with a little line, a little loop on the end of it. Now what I'm going to use this for is I'm going to zoom in, and let's say I don't quite like how the hair covers up, got these stray hairs and it kind of just distracting on her face. And so I'm going to take this brush and brush across some of those hair and get rid of them. Now something to keep in mind is that I'm working with a very soft brush, so you can change this setting right here, make it really soft. Also, I'm working with a small brush size that matches the size of the objects that I'm trying to get rid of. I don't want to go in there and take a giant tool and try to replace it with that. Work small. It helps keep your changes hidden and less obvious. And so I'll do some of these, chop some of those in there, try to get rid of some of these distracting lines that go over her face. Now sometimes it takes a little bit more. What Photoshop is doing is taking the objects that you're painting and replacing them with tones or colors that are close or nearby. So this is a handy tool to use to get rid of some minor flaws such as this. Even like out here, you can replace some strays, some flyaways, I guess you can call them, in your hair. Another tool you can use to help replace or get rid of certain objects is the clone stamp tool. You can press S on your keyboard or click on the one that looks like a little stamp. And what I want to get rid of is this weird mark on the pole for whatever reason. Maybe I just don't like the way it looks. I'm going to zoom in close, try to get a good sample of areas around this, and again working in a small brush. Now the way the clone stamp tool will work is if you press Alt or Option on your keyboard, you'll see a little target show up, and what that means is that target shows up, and if I click, I'm going to take a sample of that area and replace it with whichever part of the picture I want to paint over. And so what I like to do is, in opacity, is work fairly low, not quite 100%, but somewhere in that range, 70 or so. And I'm going to take a sample area close by. I'm not going to take a sample out here or over here. I want to take a sample of something that's very similar to what I want to paint over this area. So I'm going to hold Option or Alt. I'm going to click, and then I'm going to move my brush over that area, and you'll see as I'm painting over, there's a little crosshair that shows up. What that's telling me is that is where it's taken a sample from. So I'm going to do a few of those passes, and then I'm going to take another sample here and do a few passes over the object right here. And work on touching up this area. So now back up, couldn't necessarily tell that that was even there. And that's handy to use also if you have dust on your lens or something you want to just get rid of altogether. this case, let's say I just don't like the way this bird looks. I want to replace it with just sky instead. I'm going to work kind of the same way. I'm going to take samples from the sky that's nearby, and I'm going to start to paint over this bird. You start to see what happens now. Starts to slowly cover up that bird. I can make this thing completely disappear. You'd never know it's there once it's all said and done. So I'm going to continue taking samples from around the bird and work on replacing this thing with essentially sky. Oh, now my little my little cursor got too close to that bird's wing, so what happened was I cloned in part of that feather you can see with that right there. So I'm going to go back a step. I didn't quite like the way that turned out. Take a new sample and start replacing. Sample out there, keep placing, cloning that sky over the area where this bird used to be. So you kind of get the idea. You can keep on going, keep making some slight changes. If this is working too slow for you, you can always change the opacity and totally wipe it out and then worry about blending in those edges later. I just tend to work a little bit slower and close up to help get rid of any flaws or replace objects that I don't want there. Alright, so that pretty much takes care of those two tools for adjusting flaws.